The Utah Jazz have reportedly signaled that they plan to build around Lauri Markkanen, taking the talented power forward off the market for teams that could be interested in a trade for him. But is that the right move for the Utah Jazz? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, we're going to look at Bleacher Report's top 10 players that are most likely to be traded by this year's trade deadline. We'll take a look at all that and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your home for everything happening around the league and the world of basketball. I'm your host here, Haize, and let's go ahead and jump into it for today, y'all. So the first thing that we want to talk about is that the Utah Jazz reportedly have signaled that they do plan on building around Lauri Markkanen rather than trade the star forward this season. Now, I have my own personal thoughts when it comes down to Lauri Markkanen and his performance, but we'll get to that, right? But as of right now, Utah, and you look at where they are right now, they've been outside the postseason for quite a while, right? Lauri Markkanen is averaging a career high 28.5 points per game, which is really good when it came down to it. He signed a 4-year, $220 million extension with Utah in August of 2024. So you look at that, with that extension included a trade restriction that did expire at the end of the 2024-25 season. And many people expected Lauri Markkanen could and would be traded at that point in time. As you know, the Utah Jazz are still a franchise that is not, I don't think winning right now is their biggest goal, right? Of course, they're looking to keep stacking those draft assets until they find a star. The Utah Jazz are committed to, tanking until it really comes down and they find a star. They're 6-13 on the season, but surprisingly enough, that only has them a couple of games behind of, the play-in contention. When you look at that, and could they turn those things around? We'll see. Like I said, I don't necessarily think it's the biggest goal of that team right now to necessarily make the playoffs. And it is a little bit surprising to me that they would commit to building around Lauri Markkanen at this point in the timeline. But then again, you look at it, and the Jazz have been, organizationally focused on tanking for quite a while there. So if they ever do shift that mode to actually trying to win basketball games, could that switch for them? Now, I want to keep in mind here is that right now this year that the Utah Jazz get the most favorable of one, they have a pick swap in there with OKC that if their pick falls between 9 and 30 could go to the OKC Thunder, which could motivate them to continue bottoming out this season. But I think either way, this is a calculated risk by the Utah Jazz. If you show that you're committed to Lauri now, it could, if teams are still coming with offers leading to the trade deadline, it could very well lead then to teams having to offer you more, right, for Lauri Markkanen. And that could be the ploy here. We already know that Danny Ainge is somebody that is going to try to squeeze every bit of the value that he can get out of any deal, and that's where he's always been, right? But the Utah Jazz have not reached the playoffs since the 2021-22 season, and that's what brings me to my personal thoughts on Lauri Markkanen. Lauri is a player that absolutely puts up numbers. But have we seen Lauri yet do that for a team that is focused on winning? And that's the question that comes down to that, right? Like, of course, it ended bad in Chicago, not just because of him, but because of them organizationally moving on. Lauri kind of losing his motivation because of bad coaching and situations there in Chicago for a while. And so now you have him over to Utah, where, he wins most improved player. He has a great, reinvigorating of his career and renaissance there as a player. And that's not a bad thing for the Utah Jazz to want to commit to a player that's played their best basketball of their career in your jersey, right? But it's now understanding that, it's not going to be a quick turnaround, for this team. And Lauri Markkanen is already 28 years old. And by time the Utah Jazz maybe figure out that, hey, we're probably not going to be at the place of contention that we would want to be, by time we're at that place of contention, Lauri's probably over 30 at that point, and then the trade value goes down. So it's interesting, right? Now, this front office is led by Danny Ainge, and, he's been a GM that reportedly other GMs find very difficult to read and even negotiate with at times, right? But it seems like the Utah Jazz, per the reporting that we're hearing, are now ready to start jumpstarting their timeline. Is that because they have Ace Bailey? Is it because they just see now that they have the pieces that they feel that they can start, trying to actually compete in the Western Conference? We shall see. But for what it's worth, as things stand now and the information that we have available, the Utah Jazz are ready and committed to building around Lauri Markkanen. Now, where does that leave them as a franchise? That only can be told over time, right? And we'll see what Danny Ainge has up his sleeve for that. But you look at this Utah Jazz team and where they are financially and things like that, like, they're not in a bad place. They're $51 million beneath the first tax apron, well below the second tax apron. They have space under the luxury tax, so they don't have a lot of bad salary, even despite Lauri Markkanen making over $40 million. They only have one player in Yusuf Nurkic that's making over $10 million other than him, and his contract expires at the end of this year. So the Jazz do find themselves in a favorable, financial situation, which, we'll see what changes with, Walker Kessler being a restricted free agent at the end of this year. You have, Nang as well, who's a free agent at the end of the year, but he's 32, so they could very well move off from him and Nurkic. And a lot of their core is locked in for at least another season outside of this one before they really got to make some decisions there. So we'll see what ultimately the Jazz end up coming up with. But for now, and what they're signaling around the NBA is Lauri Markkanen is not on the trade block. For one player in Lauri who's not on to another player that could very well be on, and that is Trae Young. And reportedly, Trae Young is progressing from his sprained MCL. He's going to be reevaluated in another 2 weeks. And this is important for the Hawks to get him back out there, not because they aren't winning without him, but because if they want to trade Trae Young by the trade deadline, they're going to have to get him back out on the court, show that he's healthy as well, and then see what the value is out there on the trade market for him. And that makes sense, right? The Atlanta Hawks are a team that's 13-8 right now. They're 4-1 in their last 5 and 7-3 in their last 10. This is a team that is winning basketball games, and a lot of that has been done without Trae Young. And this new young core led by Jalen Johnson looks like it could very well be ready. And if they are, and this team looks at that and says, rather than give Trae Young the big extension that he's due for, that money could be best spread out to help add pieces around this young core that we have here that's playing some pretty solid basketball, especially in an Eastern Conference. And with reportedly teams like Minnesota that are out there looking for a point guard, not saying that Trae Young necessarily fits what they want point guard wise, they want Trae Young back out there to at least get that value up between now and the trade deadline, and we'll see. He does have a player option for $48 million next year, and we're going to see how that ends up working out for them. But this is a team that has a nice young core in Jalen Johnson, even Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's playing really well for them. Zachary Richer is looking better. Of course, you got Dyson Daniels, Asa Newell player that's going to come up as things continue to develop as well. This team has some young pillars, and it makes sense to try to build around those guys and figure out what your future is going to look like with those young guys. And if you can get a point guard in here, especially that's more two-way minded, doesn't need as much shots, maybe the offense doesn't have to go through them as much to open up things for Jalen and those other players, you're at a spot now where you can naturally do that with the way that you've been winning without Trae. So, Trae getting back out there on the basketball court could either solidify, maybe he comes back and does fit in well with those young players, and we see the Hawks be even better, or the Hawks could very well use that time period to try to market him, get that value up, and then see really what he's at. For what it's worth, Trae Young's averaging almost 18 points and 8 assists per game on the season, and the Atlanta Hawks now sit at a crossroads of, do you double down on the player that's been the face of your franchise and the heart of your offense, or do you kind of move on and do it more through your young players and find pieces that better fit them? That's the thing. We always knew coming into the season that the Atlanta Hawks had it on. They wanted to evaluate what Trae Young looked like with this young core before they made a decision on his long-term future, and that decision may be coming sooner rather than later. With that said, last topic before we get out of here, I want to take a look at Bleacher Report's 10 players that are most likely to be moved this offseason. And we're going to go through it 1 through 10, right? And we're going to talk about my thoughts on each one of those players. We're going to read a little bit of what they wrote as well. And they have number 1 on that, the Utah Jazz. Now, clearly this was written before the article that we just talked about that came out with the Jazz being committed to building around Lauri Markkanen. And so that already changes this. Now, this one did come from Jake Fisher, who said the Jazz have secretly strong incentive to sell Markkanen. Then, and rival executives have circled him as an ideal addition for the Pistons. Now, hearing that, right, and with that said, it does not seem like that's going to be that's going to be happening anymore. But for what it's worth, it does. The deal that the Bleacher Report does have out here is that the Detroit Pistons trade for Lauri Markkanen. They used Tobias Harris, Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland II, and a 2028 first-round pick and a 2030 first-round pick for Lauri Markkanen. That is a steep asking price for Lauri to give up 2 first-round picks, a young player in Jaden Ivey who is a restricted free agent at the end of the season, and veteran in Tobias Harris. But I do think something like that is probably what you're used to seeing from Danny Ainge as well. So therefore, it's not really that shocking. But I'd love to hear from you guys on that one. What do you think about Lauri Markkanen being listed as number 1 here and the deal that Bleacher Report has for him? Next up, Anthony Davis. Now, you hear a lot. Mark Cuban has come out and said that they are not going to be trading Anthony Davis. They are looking to try to win now. I personally think that that's bullshit. But for what it's worth, Bleacher Report has him here at number 2. They have surprisingly have him going to my Chicago Bulls in a package built around Kobe White, Kevin Huerter, Zach Collins, and a 2030 first-round pick that is top 3 protected and a 2031 first-round pick swap. Now, I have my personal thoughts. When you have a player that's making $60 million in Anthony Davis that doesn't average playing 60 games per season, I just don't think that's a good value for any team, much less my Chicago Bulls. I also think the Bulls specifically are a team that just got done, getting rid of a $40 million contract in Zach LaVine, have done a lot of work to clear their salary cap without big kind of bad salaries. Not necessarily saying Anthony Davis is a bad salary per se, but then again, I think the value of a $60 million contract is just too much for most teams or any player to really live up to the value. Now, I do think Anthony Davis is going to be available. Now, I think that. Is that the type of deal that you ask, that you're looking for from him? I don't believe Cuban in saying that this Dallas Mavericks team is not going to try to move off pieces and start gearing and setting up to build around Cooper Flagg. I believe that they are. Otherwise, why'd you trade Nico? If you are trying to tell me and sell me that you believe that Anthony Davis is a win now piece for this Dallas Mavericks team, that's then saying that Nico Harrison was right. So, that's just my thought process on that. You guys can let me know how you feel on that one down below. Next up, now we're getting to the players that I do think could really be available. Trey Murphy III is listed as number 3 on Bleacher Report's list, and they have him going to the San Antonio Spurs for Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, Carter Bryant, a 2026 second-round pick, and a 2031 first-round pick that comes from Sacramento or San Antonio. Now, for that, I'll say this. I actually love this trade. Trey Murphy and Saddiq Bey going to the Spurs. Actually love that. Getting a player that can be a 20-point-per-game scorer and add to that around Wemby, I think makes a lot of sense for that team. And Trey Murphy III, I think, is probably the best bang for your buck as far as money, how much time he has left on that deal before it even reaches $30 million, and the age of being 25 years old. I think Trey Murphy could be one of the best trade acquisitions any team can make at the trade deadline. It just depends on what their palette is and what they want to give up for it. Next up, LaMelo Ball. They have LaMelo Ball going to the Washington Wizards for C.J. McCollum, Bub Carrington, a 2027 second-round pick, another 2027 second-round pick, a 2029 first-round pick, and a 2031 first-round pick. I don't know if the Wizards are ready for that type of move. This is a young team that I think has a lot of young talent. Bub Carrington would make a lot of sense for the Hornets. I do think this is the type of deal the Hornets should be looking for if they do move on from LaMelo Ball. I just don't know if it makes sense for the Washington Wizards. But LaMelo is a player that I do think, despite hearing that the Hornets don't want to move on him, could probably be gotten for the right deal. It just depends on what that value is looking at. Number 5, Domantas Sabonis. They have Domantas Sabonis going to the Golden State Warriors for Kuminga, Moses Moody, Buddy Hield, Trace Jackson Davis, and the 2028 first-round pick. I like the idea of Sabonis on the Warriors. You're keeping Draymond, you have Jimmy as well and what he can do defensively. At times, he's not the on-ball defender he once was, but still can definitely help with that. I actually like Sabonis on the Warriors quite a bit, actually, but I do think Sabonis is a player that's probably going to be moved at this deadline or in the offseason. And the Warriors, especially as they're trying to gear up and try to win a title now while Steph is still Steph Curry, it makes a lot of sense there. Next up, the player that we talked about before, Trae Young with the Atlanta Hawks. Bleacher Report has him listed as the 6th most likely player to be moved at the trade deadline. They have him going to the Phoenix Suns for Jalen Green, Nick Richards, Rasheer Fleming, a 2027 first-round pick, and a 2029 second-round pick. This would be a hell of a deal for the Atlanta Hawks. You're getting a young guard back in Jalen Green, who I don't know fits with their young core, but is still a younger player, right? Doesn't have long left on his deal. You're getting Nick Richards, which is a solid young big, and Rasheer Fleming, who I do think is going to be a really good and probably one of the best players to come out of that second round as he continues to develop as his defense and floor stretching ability. I actually don't hate that deal. I do think Trae Young is a player that's probably going to be moved. Number 7, Daniel Gafford with the Dallas Mavericks. They have him going to the Los Angeles Lakers for Jared Vanderbilt, Dalton Knecht, and a 2031 first-round pick. I don't think the Mavs are probably going to get much better than that. You get Dalton Knecht, a young player, to go along with your rebuild, see what he's going to turn into. You get another first-round pick that's top 3 protected, and a defender in Jared Vanderbilt who can fit really in any system. The Lakers then get another big to add. That could be a lob threat for Luka, a player that actually went on a finals run with Luka before. I think that makes a lot of sense for both sides. At number 8, Ja Morant. They have him going to the Raptors for Quickly, Grady Dick, and a 2026 second-round pick from the Lakers, and a 2028 first-round pick that's top 3 protected. I still don't believe that the Grizzlies are going to move Ja Morant yet. I do think that's something that could happen down the line, but I guess we'll have to see how that one shakes out. Next up, Nick Claxton with the Brooklyn Nets. They'd be smart to move him. They have him going to the Boston Celtics for Anthony Simons, a second-round pick and a 2027 first-round pick that's top 5 protected. I actually like that deal for the Celtics a lot. It gives them, a big that they're missing now on that can play when Jason Tatum's back fully healthy. I think that makes sense for them in the present and in the long run. Anthony Simons doesn't really fit that team as far as because they have such a position of need. They're probably not going to re-sign him and look to move him anyway. This will make sense. At number 10, the last player, Jonathan Kuminga. And I think when the Warriors signed him to that contract, they knew that this was a contract that they wanted to move. That's why they didn't have, the player option in regards to that. They have him sending Kuminga, Moses Moody, and Buddy Hield and a 2026 first-round pick to the Brooklyn Nets for Michael Porter Jr. Now, I don't know if that really makes sense for the Warriors. Michael Porter Jr. is a solid player, has gone on championships runs with the Denver Nuggets. He is often injured, and I do think they need more defense than offense. Does he fit their offensive scheme? Yeah, I could probably say that he does. But I think without a true big there, which they are missing some depth at center, I just don't know how far the Warriors can go. But I do think Jonathan Kuminga is a player that definitely could be moved here at the trade deadline. But let me know what you guys think on that. That's Bleacher Report's top 10 players that are most likely to be moved at the trade deadline. To recap, Kuminga, Nick Claxton, John Morant, Daniel Gafford, Trae Young, Domantas Sabonis, LaMelo Ball, Trey Murphy III, Anthony Davis, and Lauri Markkanen. Let me know what you guys think on that one down below. That wraps up today's episode of NBA Central. While Utah looks ready to go all in on Lauri, is that the right decision? Trae Young is trending towards the right direction, but is still reportedly on the trade block. And we'll see who's going to stay, who's going to go. It's always a fun part to discuss as the NBA season goes on. You guys can follow us at NBA Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for our mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything basketball related. But that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.